There was a time, not that long ago, when I thought I was doing everything right. I had a steady job, paid my bills on time, even made minimum payments on my student loans and credit cards. From the outside looking in, I seemed like I had it together. But on the inside, I was quietly drowning. And the worst part? I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten. It all hit me one Thursday morning. I remember it so vividly. I was standing in line at the pharmacy, waiting to pick up a prescription. Just a regular day. I'd grabbed a few things, nothing crazy. Toothpaste, some vitamins, a bottle of shampoo. Maybe 30 tops. When I swiped my debit card, it got declined. I laughed it off, that awkward laugh like, "Oh, must be a bank error or something." Tried again. Declined. My face flushed. I could feel the people behind me shifting impatiently. I pulled out my credit card and prayed silently. It went through. I walked out of that store not just embarrassed, but shaken. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't a fluke. It wasn't the first time I'd played financial roulette at the checkout line. I was constantly shifting money between accounts, paying one card off just to charge it back up, and never really knowing where my money was going. What really scared me wasn't the 30. It was the realization that I was in my late 20s, working full-time, and still living paycheck to paycheck, with nothing to show for it. No savings. No investments. Just a growing cloud of anxiety every time I opened my bank app. Worse, I avoided thinking about money. I didn't budget. I didn't plan. Honestly, I was scared to look too closely because I was afraid of what I'd find. I remember that night I went home, sat on the couch, and just spiraled. I Googled things like, how to get your finances in order, why am I so bad with money, budgeting for beginners. Classic panic search energy. Somewhere down that rabbit hole, I came across a blog post that mentioned a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. The title made me roll my eyes at first. It sounded like one of those scammy get-rich-quick schemes, but something about the way people described it caught my attention. They weren't saying this book changed my life in the cliché way. They were talking about practical steps, automations, mindset shifts, real stuff. So I downloaded a sample to my phone. I figured, what do I have to lose? And let me tell you, that book didn't shame me. It didn't make me feel stupid. It talked to me like a real person, someone who just hadn't been taught how to handle money, but who still deserved a good life. And that was the moment everything started to shift for me. I didn't fix my money overnight. There were no lottery wins, no windfalls, no magical hacks. But what I did get was clarity, a roadmap, and, maybe most importantly, a new sense of confidence that I could take control of my finances, even if I had messed things up before. That night became the first step of a journey that would eventually change how I think, how I spend, how I save, and how I live. In this episode, I want to share exactly what I learned from I Will Teach You to Be Rich, how I applied those lessons in real life, and the impact it had not just on my bank account, but on my mindset, my relationships, and my peace of mind. Because if you're anything like I was confused, overwhelmed, or just plain tired of the stress, then I hope this story gives you hope that real change is possible. Even if you're starting from zero. If there's one concept from I Will Teach You to Be Rich that completely changed my relationship with money, it was this: automation is freedom. Before reading the book, I used to think budgeting meant sitting down every Sunday night, going through receipts, moving money around manually, and trying to guess what unexpected bill might pop up next. I hated it. I avoided it. And because I avoided it, I was constantly stressed. It felt like I was juggling a dozen balls in the air, and if I lost focus for even one day, everything would drop. But Ramit introduced this idea of building a system where your money just flows to the right places on its own, like a well-oiled machine. You set it up once, and it works quietly in the background, without you needing to obsess over every dollar. That blew my mind. So I sat down one weekend and decided to try it. I made a list of my fixed expenses: rent, internet, car insurance, student loans. Then I listed out my savings, goals, emergency fund, travel, eventually investing. I even included fun money, which I used to feel guilty about setting aside. Then, step by step, I logged into my bank and set up automatic transfers. Here's what that looked like. My paycheck hit my checking account every other Friday. That same day, my bank automatically sent $200 to my high-yield savings account for emergency fund. $50 to a travel savings account because, yes, I wanted to live, not just survive. A portion to my Roth IRA once I opened one through a brokerage. My rent was paid automatically through a scheduled transfer. My credit card was set to auto-pay the full statement balance. And what was left? That stayed in checking as guilt-free spending money. Within 2 months of setting it all up, my entire financial life felt lighter. I wasn't waking up at 2 a.m. wondering if I paid the electric bill. I wasn't constantly checking my account before grabbing coffee with a friend. And best of all, I finally saw my savings growing without me doing anything. I'll be honest. The first time I looked at my emergency fund and saw over 10 sitting there untouched, I actually teared up. Not because the amount was huge, but because it was mine. And it had been built by a system I created. That was a level of control I'd never felt with money before. Of course, not everything went perfectly right away. I made some adjustments. At one point, I realized I was saving too aggressively and didn't have enough left to enjoy life, so I rebalanced. That's something Ramit also emphasizes. Systems are meant to serve you, not punish you. Flexibility is part of the plan. I also started tracking things not obsessively, but just enough to make sure the automation was working. Every few weeks, I'd log into my accounts, see the progress, and make tweaks if needed. No stress. No spreadsheets with 12 tabs. Just a bird's eye view of a system quietly working for me. And over time, the benefits rippled into other areas of my life. I stopped having money fights with my partner. We set up a shared expenses account and automated both of our contributions. Suddenly, dinner dates and rent payments were never a source of tension again. I felt confident saying yes to a weekend trip with friends because I had a travel fund sitting there, money I had already planned to spend. Most of all, I stopped being afraid of my finances. That alone was worth everything. If you've never set up automation, it might sound complicated at first, but it's really not. It's just a few intentional steps that you do once and then the system takes care of the rest. No, it won't make you rich overnight, but it will give you something even more valuable: peace of mind. And that peace of mind creates space to think, to plan, to dream bigger without the constant background noise of money stress. Automation was the first domino for me. Once I got that right, everything else started falling into place. One of the most liberating lessons I learned from I Will Teach You to Be Rich was this: you don't have to give up your daily latte to build wealth. That idea alone felt revolutionary to me. Because let me tell you, before reading the book, I was constantly feeling guilty about small purchases. I'd stand in line at Starbucks and hear this voice in my head: do you really need this? Think of what you could do with that $5. Every time I ordered takeout, I'd mentally calculate how much I wasted instead of cooking. It was this ongoing cycle of guilt over the tiniest expenses while completely ignoring the bigger picture. What Ramit taught me, and what I truly got after applying it, was that the real game changers in your finances are the big wins. The major levers that actually move the needle: negotiating your salary, lowering recurring fixed costs, paying off high-interest debt, and earning more. So I made a choice. I stopped sweating the small stuff and started hunting down those big wins. The first major move I made, I negotiated my rent. Yeah, I didn't think it was possible either. But I was living in a big apartment complex, and my lease was coming up. I had never negotiated rent in my life. I always just accepted whatever the renewal rate was and signed. But this time, I did some research. Looked at comparable units. Noticed the complex had a few empty apartments. And I crafted a respectful, confident email asking if they'd consider keeping my rent the same in exchange for renewing early. To my surprise, they said yes. Just like that, I saved $200 over the next year. The next big win? I finally tackled my high-interest credit card debt. Instead of just throwing whatever was left over at the end of the month at my balance, I created a plan. I called my credit card company and negotiated a lower interest rate. I also opened a 0% APR balance transfer card and moved a chunk of my debt there. That alone saved me hundreds in interest. I also called my internet provider and after 20 minutes on hold got my bill lowered by 20 month. Not glamorous, but that's $240 a year for a single phone call. But the biggest mindset shift of all came when I stopped obsessing over cutting costs and started thinking about earning more. That meant asking myself, how can I increase my income instead of limiting my joy? I looked at my skills and realized I had something valuable to offer. I was decent at writing and editing skills I never thought I could monetize. I signed up for a few freelance platforms, did some small gigs in the evenings after work, and by the third month, I was earning an extra $300-500 consistently. That's the thing about big wins. They don't just pad your bank account. They give you momentum, and that momentum creates confidence. I started walking through life differently. I no longer hesitated before swiping my card for a dinner out with friends. I could enjoy the moment because I knew I was taking care of the important stuff. And you know what happened once I gave myself permission to stop feeling guilty about the little joys? I actually spent less because I wasn't stuck in that cycle of deprivation and rebellion. I wasn't telling myself no every 5 minutes and then blowing $200 on impulse buys out of frustration. I was spending intentionally without shame. That's the magic of focusing on big wins. You can keep your coffee, you can enjoy your Friday night takeout, and you can still build a solid, rich financial life. I'm not saying the small things don't matter at all, but I am saying that if you're spending hours clipping coupons or arguing with yourself about a 6 smoothie, while ignoring the fact that you're underpaid or drowning in a high-interest car loan, you're aiming at the wrong target. For me, once I started stacking these big wins, it was like compound interest for my confidence. Each one made the next feel easier. So, if you're listening to this and feeling overwhelmed, here's my challenge to you. Pick one big win this week. Maybe it's asking for a raise. Maybe it's canceling that subscription you don't use. Maybe it's finally opening that high-yield savings account. Don't worry about your lattes. Just start where it counts. If you asked me a few years ago, what does a rich life look like to you? I would have probably said something generic like, not worrying about bills, or having enough to travel. But the truth? I didn't really know. I was just repeating what I thought I was supposed to want. That changed when I read the chapter in I Will Teach You to Be Rich about defining your own rich life. Not someone else's version. Not what social media says, not what your parents dreamed for you, yours. It sounds simple, but for me, this was one of the most powerful and emotional takeaways from the entire book. Ramit doesn't define a rich life as having yachts or private jets. He asks a deeper question: what would a rich life mean for you personally? That question stopped me in my tracks. So I sat with it for a while. I turned off distractions and really thought, what would make me feel rich not just in my bank account, but in my daily experience. Here's what I came up with. Not stressing about the check at dinner with friends. Taking one international trip a year without putting it on a credit card. Being able to help my parents financially if they ever needed it. Having one day a week where I didn't have to look at my to-do list. Saying yes to spontaneous plans without having to move money between accounts. None of that required being a millionaire. What it did require was clarity and a plan. So I made a new kind of vision board, not one with photos of mansions or luxury cars. Mine had a picture of a beach in Portugal, a smiling group of friends at dinner, a bank app screenshot showing a positive balance, a simple living room with plants and sunlight. Those things felt rich to me. Then I got to work reverse engineering that vision. If I wanted to travel, I needed a travel fund. So I set up an automatic transfer just $40 a week. Not a lot, but it added up. By the end of the year, I had nearly 2 saved and booked a trip to Portugal. For the first time ever, I paid for the whole thing before I stepped on the plane. If I wanted guilt-free dinners with friends, I needed a fun money budget. So I carved out $150 a month just for that. No guilt, no shame. I called it my Joy Fund, and I used it exactly how I wanted. If helping my parents was part of my rich life, I had to start building a giving category. I opened a second savings account labeled Family. I didn't even tell them it was just there, quietly growing, for the day I might need it. These small actions made my financial life feel more aligned, not just logical, but meaningful. I was no longer saving out of fear or spending out of impulse. I was directing my money with purpose. And that changed how I felt every time I opened my bank app. Instead of dread, I felt ownership. Instead of shame, I felt pride. Here's the thing. Defining your rich life doesn't just help you save smarter or spend more intentionally. It gives you permission. Permission to let go of things you don't actually care about and invest more emotionally and financially in what lights you up. For example, I used to feel bad that I didn't own a house. Everyone around me seemed obsessed with getting a mortgage before 30, like it was the ultimate sign of being an adult. But when I really asked myself, do I want that? The answer was, not right now. My rich life wasn't about home ownership. It was about freedom and flexibility, being able to move cities if I wanted, not worrying about leaky roofs or property taxes. And that realization saved me from making a 6-figure mistake out of peer pressure. And that's what I want to stress most in this lesson. Your rich life might not look like anyone else's, and that's okay. In fact, that's the point. It's not about chasing someone else's dream. It's about getting clear on what matters to you, and then building a financial life that supports it. So if you're listening right now and feeling unsure about where your money is going or why it doesn't feel fulfilling, maybe it's time to ask yourself that same question. What does your rich life actually look like? Not what you think it should be. What it really is. Take some time. Write it down. Get specific. Then look at your bank accounts, your calendar, your habits, and ask, is any of this helping me get there? If the answer is no, don't beat yourself up. Just start making small changes that align with the life you actually want to live. Because the goal isn't to be rich by someone else's definition. It's to wake up every day and say, wow, I'm living my rich life right now. And trust me, that feeling? It's worth every penny. If I had to sum up one of the most freeing ideas I took from I Will Teach You to Be Rich, it's this. It's okay to spend money when it's intentional. I used to think being good with money meant cutting out everything I enjoyed, skipping dinners out, buying the off-brand everything, feeling guilty every time I opened Amazon or even treated myself to a new pair of sneakers. It was exhausting. The problem wasn't the spending itself. It was the lack of clarity behind why I was spending or why I was cutting back. This is where Ramit's idea of conscious spending completely shifted the game for me. He breaks it down like this: spend extravagantly on the things you love, and cut ruthlessly on the things you don't. When I first read that, I paused. Wait, you mean I don't have to deprive myself? I can actually spend money on things that bring me joy and not feel bad about it? That one mindset shift changed how I viewed every dollar I earned. I sat down one afternoon, opened a blank note on my phone, and wrote a simple question at the top. What do I genuinely love spending money on? And my list surprised me. It wasn't luxury items or designer clothes. It was weekend brunch with friends, flights to visit family, quality skincare, yes, even that 40 moisturizer, cozy Airbnb stays in small towns, really good books, even if I didn't finish them all. On the flip side, I realized I was spending money on a lot of things I didn't actually care about. Streaming services I never used, gym memberships I hadn't stepped foot in for months, clothes I bought on impulse and never wore, random tech subscriptions that kept renewing silently. So I made some cuts not because I had to, but because I wanted to redirect that money toward what made me feel alive. I canceled 3 subscriptions that day, saved $45 a month. I downgraded my phone plan and saved another $26. Then I turned around and added $100 a month to what I now call my Joy account. It's literally a separate checking account labeled Joy, and I use it for guilt-free spending on the stuff I love. Brunch, road trips, spontaneous books, whatever fills my cup. And here's the wild part. Once I gave myself permission to spend on what I valued, I actually spent less overall. No more impulse purchases out of boredom. No more revenge spending after a long week. No more guilt when the Amazon box arrived at my door. Every dollar had a purpose now. And that purpose was either joy or peace of mind. I started budgeting not out of fear, but out of alignment. This is what conscious spending taught me. It's not about saying no all the time. It's about saying a louder yes to the things that actually matter. A great example of this was when I took a weekend trip to the mountains last fall. Normally, I would have talked myself out of it. Too expensive, too indulgent. But I'd been saving in my Joy account, and when I looked at the balance, it was sitting there ready. So I booked the Airbnb, packed my bags, and went. And during that quiet weekend, sipping coffee on a porch with autumn leaves all around me, I had a moment of deep gratitude. Not just for the trip, but for the fact that I could fully enjoy it, knowing it had been planned for, saved for, and aligned with what I value. That's what guilt-free spending feels like, and I want that for everyone. It's not about how much you spend, it's about how much your spending reflects who you are and what you love. Because when your money supports the life you actually want to live, every dollar becomes more meaningful. And that's the heart of this lesson. If you've been stuck in a cycle of restriction, if you've been telling yourself you shouldn't buy the thing, even though it brings you real happiness, if you've ever opened your bank statement and felt ashamed, confused, or just flat out numb, then this is your wake-up call. You don't need to earn more to feel rich. You need to get clear on what rich means to you, and then spend accordingly. So here's my challenge to you today. Write your own joy list. Find 2 things you love spending money on. Then find 2 things you can cut without missing them. Reclaim those dollars and use them intentionally. Because wealth isn't just about saving more. It's about living better with what you already have. And when you spend consciously, you get to do just that. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how different my life feels compared to just a few years ago. Back then, I was always in survival mode. Every paycheck felt like a quick gulp of air before I sank back under again. I'd avoid checking my bank account because I didn't want to face reality. I told myself I was bad with money. like it was some unchangeable part of my identity. But really, I was just uninformed. Nobody had ever shown me how to manage money. School didn't teach it. My family didn't talk about it. So I did what a lot of people do. I guessed. I winged it. I hoped for the best. And for a while, that worked until it didn't. The difference between then and now? I know where my money is going. I know what I'm working toward. I know what a rich life looks like for me, and I'm building it every single day. It didn't take winning the lottery. It didn't take moving back in with my parents. It didn't take cutting out everything fun or depriving myself until I burned out. What it took was a mindset shift. Reading I Will Teach You to Be Rich didn't just give me financial tips, it gave me a framework for thinking about money in a way that finally made sense. It gave me permission to ditch shame, to ditch fear, and to start over on my own terms. Now, I have automated systems that run my financial life. My savings grow in the background while I go about my day. I don't worry if I've forgotten a bill or if I can afford to go out this weekend. I know I can. I'm no longer stuck in a loop of maybe next month or someday I'll figure it out. I am figuring it out in real time, with real wins, some small, some big, but all of them mine. I've built an emergency fund that gives me peace of mind. I've paid down debt that used to keep me up at night. I've taken trips that used to only live on my vision board. And I've started saying yes to things that matter without second-guessing every purchase. But more than the numbers, the biggest change is how I feel about money. I'm no longer afraid of it. I don't feel trapped by it. And I no longer see it as something that controls Mabu, something I use with intention. That emotional shift, it rippled into other parts of my life too. I've become more confident in conversations about money with my partner, with my friends, even with myself. I've stopped comparing my financial journey to others because I know what my rich life looks like. And maybe most importantly, I've learned how to enjoy the present without sabotaging the future. That balance took time. It took unlearning. It took effort. But it was worth every step. And I share all of this not because I have it all figured out. I don't. There are still things I'm working on: investing more, planning for bigger goals, learning to say no when spending isn't aligned. But I'm no longer in the dark. I'm in motion. And that, to me, is the biggest win of all. So if you're listening right now and you feel where I was, you feel lost or behind or overwhelmed, I want you to know you're not broken. You're not bad with money. You're not too late. You just haven't been shown the right tools yet. And once you have them, everything can change. Not overnight, but gradually, quietly, powerfully, just like it did for me. If you've made it this far in the episode, first of all, thank you. Seriously, thank you for listening, for showing up, for giving your attention to something as personal and vulnerable as money. Because I know how hard it is to even start this journey. Money touches everything. Our relationships, our confidence, our daily peace. And when it feels messy or overwhelming, it can cast a shadow over your whole life. I've been there. But here's what I want to leave you with. You don't need to fix everything today. You just need to take the next right step. Maybe that means opening a high-yield savings account. Maybe it means canceling one subscription you don't use. Maybe it's simply grabbing a journal and writing down, what does my rich life look like? Whatever that step is, take it. Today, while this is still fresh. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be yours. Because once you take that step, however small, you're no longer stuck. You're in motion. And from there, every little decision starts to build something bigger, something stronger, something more aligned with the life you actually want to live. I want you to remember, this is your story. You don't need to follow anyone else's blueprint. You just need the tools, the mindset, and the courage to build your own version of rich. And if you ever feel lost, again, go back to the basics. Automate what you can. Spend consciously. Define your vision. And above all, treat yourself with grace. Because this journey isn't just about growing your net worth, it's about growing your self-worth. And you are worth so much more than fear, guilt, or shame. Before we wrap up, I'll just say this. If anything I shared today resonated with you, if it made you think or feel seen, or inspired you to take action, I'd be so grateful if you shared this episode with a friend who might need it too. Or leave a quick review. Or even just send me a DM and tell me what part hit home for you. This podcast isn't just about me talking into a mic, it's about us building something real together. And who knows, maybe your story will be the one someone else needs to hear someday. So keep going, keep growing, and remember, you have everything it takes to live your rich life. Start today.